What's good, folks? It's KnightmareFrame here with the release of Protea Prime, and coming at you with 4 very fun builds that you should definitely try out. I'm pretty sure you've seen a couple of these builds in their own standalone videos, but since her Prime was released, I decided to put all of them together and give you some new ones. On top of that, she has a new augment coming out soon, so not yet released. Imagine it would have been so perfect that the augment came out with her Prime. You know, I'm just saying, it would have made more sense. But we have to wait for that augment to arrive, so that will have its own standalone video. How unfortunate. But let me quickly run down her abilities so you know how she works and what she does before I showcase the builds. Before we showcase her abilities, let's talk about her unique passive. If you look on the bottom right corner, she has 3 unfilled bars, and these bars fill up when you cast an ability. So cast 3 abilities, and you will notice you get 100% strength increase. This 100% strength increase affects your next ability cast or any other abilities that you have equipped on Protea. Yes, including Helminth abilities. Now, this 100% increase only functions for the first instance of the ability. For example, if an ability has multiple casts, it only works on the first initial cast. So if I were to use my first ability, that instance of the first ability gets the 100% strength increase. The other ones will not. Her first ability, it is called Grenade Fan. It has 2 modes. It has a hold cast and a quick tap. But what you can do is go to options, you go to invert tap hold abilities, all the way down to Protea and switch it to inverted. This will make sense because originally when you quick tap, you throw down these fans that slash away at enemies. That deals some damage, which I don't really care for. So I inverted it to where when I quick tap now, I get the useful grenade fans. Now these grenade fans are pickups. When you pick these up, pay attention, I get shields and shield regeneration. On top of that, this grenade fan gives me a better and longer shield gate duration when my shields break. Her second ability, Blaze Artillery, which she's famously known for. Protea deploys turrets, which then fire at enemies. As you'll see right here, it scales with enemy level and scales on how many times they hit enemies and how long they're present on the field. Unfortunately, these turrets sometimes have the worst target acquisition where they will ignore the target that's literally right in front of them and proceed to shoot enemies that are 5 billion miles away. They really need an upgrade to their AI. They just stay in one spot and do not move with you. So we'll see how the augment works with this second ability. Hopefully they follow you around. That'll be so freaking awesome. And this is why some people usually use a grouping Helminth. So when it clumps up enemies, the turrets have just pure focus on that clump of enemies and shred everything that is clumped up. And the turrets only deal heat damage. Protea's third ability is Dispensary. This is a stationary ability. Unfortunately, it doesn't move. It doesn't go anywhere with you, but is displayed on your map right there, as you can see. And this provides you with energy, health, and universal ammo. So this also contributes to arc gun ammo. So she's a pretty good warframe when you want to level up your arc gun because you never run out of ammo. And because it provides you with health and energy orb, this synergizes really well with a mod called Equilibrium, and also the Equilibrium Shards, which converts health into energy and energy into health. Her fourth ability is the one ability that people are usually not too comfortable using, Temporal Anchor. So she deploys an anchor in time. So she can move around, do whatever she wants, deploys anything, turrets, whatnot, and then goes back in time to where she last casted the ability and returns that energy, ammo, and whatever during the moment she casted that ability. So the energy return will start after the energy has been consumed when you casted the ability. So it doesn't return everything back. Another thing to note, when you go back in time, you implode on enemies. I know. And this scales with the amount of damage that you've dealt during your Temporal Anchor. So when you go into Temporal Anchor, all that damage that you deal will be stored up in Temporal Anchor. And when you go back in time, you do this implosion and it's dealt to enemies in blast damage. Unfortunately, it's blast damage. We'll see how they rework blast damage soon. And this explosion also, as you saw, pulls in enemies. So first, let's start off with some of the utility weapons, and then I'll move into the Archon Shards, and then finally the Helminth abilities, which will make more sense with the Archon Shards. Anyway, starting off with our first utility weapon, it's going to be my Grimoire. Funny enough, it's not for energy regen, but for strength increase with Vom Invocation. So alternate fire, this ticks on enemies and gives you 60% strength at max stacks, which is pretty much a molt augmented. And of course, Hara Canticle for the universal orb drop. Otherwise, that's it. That's all you need. And then for my other utility weapon, I will be using the Booba Nico, and this is going to be my primer for a specific build. The unique thing about the Booba Nico is that it has viral on its alternate fire, so I can mod it for corrosive and other elements. As you can see here, I have it for corrosive, viral, radiation, and cold. And the cold is to proc primary frostbite for some more multi-shot. Otherwise, it's a very simple loadout. You have my corrosive, cold, and atomic fallout for that juicy radiation. So this crowd controls enemies and armor strips them with a corrosive procs. And my other utility weapon is going to be the Epitaph for Heat Inherit. Heat Inherit is a term that defines how you can scale heat damage with multiple procs from different sources, starting off with the first initial proc that is applied onto the enemy, and that is going to be with my secondary weapon, as the heat proc scales from your damage, heat percentage, and faction damage multiplier, which then affects any type of weapon or ability that deals heat damage afterwards, as both of those heat procs from those two sources will scale into each other, as heat is an infinitely scaling damage type. So what I'm saying is, you prime enemies with the big heat number and a faction mod, so then that your heat abilities deal more damage. And now for the disruption loadout, I'll be using the Kum Pressa. This is also going to be running a heat inherit loadout. You have faction damage mod. Make sure you have the heat percentage pretty high, and it's modded for corrosive and heat because this weapon is innate viral. So we're priming with viral, we have heat damage, and shoot, it's just going to improve the damage with Blaze Artillery. For my focus school, it's all going to be in Madurai. Madurai is going to give us power transfer, sling strength, and if you're dealing with Thrax units, you have Void Strike and Contamination Wave. Moving on to the Archon Shards. 2 casting speed shards are a must. It greatly improves her animations. And the 2 Emerald Shards here, green shards, to increase my corrosive stacks so that it reaches to 14 stacks, so that provides me with a 100% armor strip, which will make sense for 2 of the builds. Otherwise, if you're not going to use those 2 builds, it doesn't really matter. And then my final shard here is effective on energy orb pickups. This grants me even more energy when I pick up orbs. Nautilus is going to be the best in slot companion for majority of these builds. The only reason is that it has Cordon. This will group in enemies for us. It does have a 15-second cooldown, but we can reduce that cooldown with Manifold Bond. Killing enemies with 3 or more status effects reduces cooldowns of your Sentinel abilities. For the Heat Inherent one, I suggest not to use Assault mode and switch it to anything else because you don't want your Sentinel to interfere with your priming. For the weapon, I'm using the Hellstrom. You mod it for Viral Heat. Very nice to have for some nice juicy damage. For this first loadout, I'm using Hydroid's first ability, Helminth, which is Tempest Barrage. This ability summons a rain of corrosive damage that also procs the corrosive status effect. Please take note of that. And then it also has an augment called Viral Tempest that allows you to proc viral along with that corrosive status effect, which then pairs in with the Archon Shards to increase corrosive stacks, which armor strips. You see where we're going with this? So that's 2 status effects. I've been holding up 2 fingers this whole time. So the third status effect is going to be from the heat damage that is procced from Blaze Artillery. So the 3 status effects from Tempest Barrage and Blaze Artillery will trigger Manifold Bond to reduce the cooldown of Cordon. So we have our auto grouping with the Sentinel combined with this Helminth synergy. On top of that, it armor strips enemies, so then my Blaze Artillery deals even more damage. And I'm not really using any of my weapons. It's just going to be an ability cast loadout. I'm proccing corrosive, viral. See how it's triggering Cordon back and forth? My shields broke. I cast my grenade fan and regenerate those shields right back. Cordon triggers again. Summon my Tempest Barrage and Blaze Artillery, shredding enemies. If I need energy, I do have my Dispensary. See how the grouping is proccing quite often because I'm killing enemies. There it goes again, killing enemies with 3 or more status effects, and that's reducing the cooldown thanks to Manifold Bond. That's another set of grouping right there. Back in the orbiter, let's take a look at that build. Now for the arcanes, I'll be running Molt Efficiency. Yeah, no, not Molt Augmented, but Molt Efficiency, just for increased duration, and Arcane Energize, just to give me even more energy when I pick up orbs. Now for the aura, I'll be running Enemy Radar, just so I can see enemies on the map a lot clearly, because I won't be chasing them down as they'll be dragged towards me. And Prime Sure-Footed for the knockdown and stagger resistance. Now this build may be very funny because it doesn't use any strength mods, because all the strength is coming from her passive. And Blaze Artillery will scale off a mod and enemy level, which is going to be pretty useful. But first, we're going to deal with Tempest Barrage, giving us that augment that primes viral, so we get corrosive and viral. For the duration, Prime Continuity, upkeeping all of my abilities, which will also pair with Molt Efficiency. While shields are active, I get ability duration. She's doing that pretty easily with Grenade Fan. Equilibrium, which synergizes with her third ability Dispensary, as it provides you health and energy orbs. So this is going to be a nice boost to energy economy. And because I'm spamming my abilities a lot without any efficiency mod, Equilibrium and Energize are going to be very useful in this case. Prime Flow, just to give me a larger energy pool. Now to increase the range of my Tempest Barrage, because unfortunately the explosion range doesn't scale that well, so I need to have 2 range mods with Augur Reach and a Stretch. Both of these contribute a lot to that Tempest Barrage loadout. And yes, that also increases the target acquisition for Blaze Artillery for additional survivability, and cleansing me of status effects and giving that 3 seconds of iframes is Rolling Guard. And then finally, I have Archon Vitality. Funny enough, you don't need to rank this mod up. I do use the lower rank one because the health really doesn't matter, because you have a lot of shields with you. I'm just using this mod for the double heat damage, and that works really well with Blaze Artillery, scaling our damage with those additional heat procs. So this is the first loadout using Tempest Barrage, Viral Tempest, and Blaze Artillery with the 2 green shards to armor strip dragon enemies and kill them without even using your weapons or priming with your weapons. Okay, back in Steel Path, showing you the second loadout. This is using the Nourish Helminth. Everybody's familiar with Nourish. What does it do? Gives your weapon a viral elemental damage multiplier, and it also provides you with an energy multiplier. Notice how I replace the third ability for this particular loadout. On top of that, I'm using the 4th ability with its augment. Now, the interesting part about the 4th ability augment is that when you activate Temporal Anchor, so when you're doing your time loopy thing, as long as that ability is active, your second ability, Blaze Artillery, and the first ability, Grenade Fan, the slashy version of it, not the shield version, both of those abilities will armor strip enemies. And this armor strip scales with strength. And at base, it's 10% strength per hit. Alright, you may have noticed I performed 2 Void Slings here, and that is to give me that Sling Strength buff from Madurai. And I'm going to use that strength increase to snapshot into my Nourish, providing me with even more strength. So my main source of energy income is going to be from kills and using my Temporal Anchor. So the one thing about this loadout you want to make sure is that you always cast your abilities when you're in Temporal Anchor. Otherwise, no energy back. I can use my Grimoire here to get the additional 60% strength increase, as you see right there. Pair this up with Void Sling, Nourish, cast Temporal Anchor, use all my abilities as they deal even more damage now. See all the energy I have right there? We're gonna go back in time, refill all that energy, and even pick up the energy that we've dropped. Temporal Anchor, use your abilities, kill everything, and this is a very ability spam build. I'm just spamming abilities like crazy. Gonna go back in time. Oh, Nourish ran out, so make sure to do my Void Slings, recast it, pick up energy orbs, and look how it's refilled. Temporal Anchor again, spam my abilities, and it's gonna armor strip, shred everything in sight. Go back in time. I know people might not like this loadout, but I like it. And what you can do is fill up your your passive. Somebody stole my weapon. Where's my weapon? You can fill up your passive, use Void Sling and the 60% increase, and cast Nourish to get an even bigger energy buff. And just go back in time. Temporal Anchor, and you rinse and repeat. It's such a basic build that provides you with the armor strip and a lot of damage, and not having to worry about Dispensary, because this allows you to be a bit more active. Unlike the first build, where you can sit in one spot and do whatever you want. So here we are back in the Orbiter to take a look at the Nourish loadout. For the Arcanes, going to be using Molt Augmented for the 60% strength increase, and Arcane Steadfast. This has a 20% chance to grant us 3 free energy casts, which is very nice because we're just spamming abilities like crazy, as you may have noticed. Now, in the aura, I have Corrosive Projection, just for that 18% armor strip. PSF, if you don't have this, again, use Handspring. And now I'm going to be shoving a decent amount of strength on this loadout. But first, Prime Continuity. This is going to be our main duration increase. For the strength, I have Blind Rage and Umbral Intensify. This gives me 243% strength, plus the Void Sling, plus Molt Augmented, and the Grimoire. So we have a lot of strength increase, which definitely improves the damage on Blaze Artillery and the energy economy on Nourish. For survivability, Rolling Guard yet again. For our energy maintenance, I have Equilibrium and Prime Flow. This is a staple on Protea. And my only range increase here is going to be Stretch, because yes, Stretch does increase the implosion radius. It does also increase the Nourish viral poo-poo. When enemies damage you, you also spread viral onto them, which is very useful. And then finally, her Temporal Erosion Augment. This is the 4th ability augment, not the 1st or 2nd ability. As long as this ability is active, your 2nd and 1st ability will armor strip enemies. And you have noticed right there, it scales with strength. It went from 10% to 24% with 243 strength, but it goes a lot higher thanks to these strength increases. And you can tell by the loadout names what abilities and what Helminth is coming next. Okay, here we are in Steel Path yet again, but we're in a Grimoire tile at this time just to spice things up. Now, this third loadout is the Roar setup. This can be used in survival and in disruption. That's the cool part about it, because it has its own armor strip without using abilities, and it increases the damage of your 2nd ability thanks to Roar, because Roar is a universal damage multiplier and a faction damage multiplier. Her 2nd ability, Blaze Artillery, deals heat damage, and heat is a damage over time damage type, and Roar double dips every damage over time that there is. So your heat, bleeds, toxin damage over time, all that good stuff gets 2 times the damage thanks to Roar. And because I have a weapon like the Booba Nico that can prime enemies for me for corrosive viral, that debuffs them so they take even more damage from Blaze Artillery and Roar. Let's use my Roar. Look at all these enemies. Prime them. They're already dead. This is definitely for higher level gameplay because you will kill them fairly quickly. That's why this is also very good in places like Disruption. But as you can see, we're shredding these enemies like nothing. Yeah! As you know, in Disruption, you kill enemies, they drop keys, and then you're gonna get your Demolisher, which runs to the conduit and blow it up. And your job is to stop them. Now, there are 2 bad modifiers in Disruption: Enemy Toxin Weapon and Energy Drain. So just pay attention to those modifiers. Enemy Cold Weapons is fine, but this will hurt our shields. Let's make sure we have 100% strength. Buff our Roar. Let's find the... Okay, here's the Demolist. Okay, Void Sling with Magus Lockdown to hold them in place. A Compressor. Gonna prime them, armor strip them, stack your 2nd ability, and then they just die. Oh, we got a key. You can animation cancel pick up the key by dodge rolling and pressing your interact. That's another tip if you want to know. All right, 10 of fire. Oh, this is perfect. This is really good for my compressor. Where is it coming from? Is this the Nox? Yes, it is. Lock them down in place. I love when my turrets target the other enemy instead of the Demolist. God damn it. Okay, let's go. Okay, here he is. Lock them down. Spam your 2nd ability, and then they die. You get the gist of it. This loadout scales pretty well into level cap if you want. So if you're doing the heat inherit loadout, especially for disruption, remember, you don't need to mod for assault mode because you don't want it to attack enemies, especially if your weapon is modded with heat, because it's going to mess up the first initial heat proc, which your other heat damage procs will scale with. So for this loadout, augmented, energize, you know what they do, strength, energy, all the good stuff. In the aura, you have growing power. This is a 25% strength increase when you apply status effects, and this loadout is nothing but status application with your weapons, not abilities, unfortunately, but with your weapons. The usual. Now for this, we're going to be doing things a bit differently when it comes to strength increases. Prime continuity is, of course, duration. You know what it does. I will have transient fortitude and precision intensify. The good thing about this is that it gives you 90% strength increase on the fourth ability. And what happens to be our fourth ability? Haha, roar. So roar gets a massive bump in strength. So we have growing power, transient fortitude, and precision intensify, along with molt augmented, her passive, and Matterized Void Sling. But if you're going to take this into level cap, then maybe use the Vazarin Focus School, because you could get that annoying enemy toxin weapon, which completely one-shots you. So the staple, equilibrium, flow, constitution for some duration, and again, we're going to be using rolling guard for our survivability. Now the last slot depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing regular content, then I highly recommend having stretch, because then you can buff your allies and you can have better target acquisition. But if you're going to be doing disruption, then I suggest Archon Vitality. It doesn't have to be ranked up, but you can also do the same loadout even in survival. It doesn't matter, it's fine. Yeah, your range is going to be slightly diminished, but it's just fine. So if you want a bit more damage, then Archon Vitality, and if you want more versatility with group buffing, then stretch is going to be your best friend. All right, here we are back into Steel Path, looking at our final loadout, and this time we're not using the Nautilus, but a hound. This hound is going to be very nice as a utility pet, as it's going to prime enemies and disarm enemies, because with this loadout you can either run the heat inherit mechanic with an epitaph or just group enemies up and kill them. And yes, this is going to use grouping with the pull Helminth ability. Pull is from mag, it groups up enemies, it costs a lot less energy, spammable, and it pulls what you need. And it doesn't remain there getting enemies stuck, because you can just recast it and reposition the enemies. You can see right there, so I can prime enemies, shoot them. The turrets have really bad target acquisition because they tend to ignore enemies that are right in front of them. And when enemies are disarmed, they're more likely to walk towards you because they don't have their guns. That's another additional utility right there. Hopefully DE fixes the turret AI, because again, a lot of AI in Warframe is so dumb. Let's take a look at that loadout. Now, if you don't want to use pull and you want to use larva, go right ahead. It's going to be a lot less range and clunky to use in certain tile sets. For the arcanes, efficiency for the duration, energize for the energy, flow, equilibrium, again, the staples. For range, I'll be running stretch and augur reach. All of this is to increase the pull range. We have 21.88 meters, which is very nice. Now again, for the aura, growing power, best mod in the game, continuity, transient fortitude, your duration, some strength, rolling guard for the iframes, and status cleansing, the usual. Then the last mod is Archon Vitality. Run at max rank, unranked, it doesn't matter. This is the loadout. Very simple, very clean. Group enemies, prime them whenever you want, and then they just die to blaze artillery. And now for my pet, it is the Hound, built from Dormammu, the Chunkla bracket, and the Hinata stabilizer. Very simple, very clean. Now for Protea, she doesn't really need Guardian or Shield Recharger mods on her because she has her first ability that replenishes the shields. So we didn't necessarily have to run these mods. But I do have Repo Audit and Syenrgy Prospectus. So both of these are going to be my consistent abilities, and they're going to be reduced thanks to Manifold Bond. Repo Audit disarms, and this one throws out an electricity pulse that stuns enemies. Pretty good. And if you want a bit more survivability on your Hound, you have Evasive Denial. This allows it to teleport. This is pretty much it's Loki's kit on a Hound. I just want you to think about that. Loki's kit is on a pet. But if you want, you can also run Mystic Bond. That's also a really good mod to have right there. For the build, just make sure you have viral, and if you want to do the heat inherent, don't mod it for heat. But it has viral radiation, very nice, and it procs electricity on the weapon. And there you have it, folks. These are the 4 Protea loadouts that will completely destroy Steel Path. If you've learned something and enjoyed the video, please do feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, a peace. Bye-bye now.